The Xylar Collective emerged from the void like a geometric nightmare, a flotilla of crystalline vessels arranged in perfect fractal patterns. Nexus Primus 7, the commanding node of this phalanx, observed the distant blue-green world of Kepler 186f through sensory arrays that perceived far beyond mere visible light. The planet, designated as Sector 734 in Xylar cartography, glimmered with potential, its crust rich with wormhole stabilization compounds, its orbit ideal for resource extraction facilities. Sector scan complete, reported Nexus Tertiary 3, one of the subnodes linked directly to Nexus Primus 7's consciousness. Human presence detected. Single installation designated Aegis Station on the fourth moon. Minimal defensive capabilities. Estimated personnel, 173 individuals. Nexus Primus 7 processed this information with the cold efficiency typical of the Xylosian hive mind. The Xylar Collective, a multi-species alliance dominated by the collective consciousness of the Xylosians, had expanded across 17 sectors in the past standard decade. Their logic was impeccable, their efficiency ruthless. Emotions were considered inefficient evolutionary artifacts, unnecessary for beings who had transcended such limitations. Initiate communication protocol. Nexus Primus 7 commanded. Standard acquisition format. The message was brief, precise, and utterly devoid of diplomatic nuance. To human inhabitants of Sector 734, the Xylar Collective claims this sector for immediate resource optimization. Your presence represents an inefficient allocation of valuable resources. You are directed to evacuate all personnel and portable equipment within 7 standard cycles. Resistance is illogical given the technological disparity between our civilizations. Acknowledgement required. The response came 3 hours later, a delay that Nexus Primus 7 attributed to the humans' inefficient decision-making processes. A man with close-cropped gray hair and the steady gaze of a veteran appeared on the communication screen. His uniform bore the insignia of Aegis Station Security. "This is Security Director Elias Vance of Aegis Station," the human began, his voice measured and calm. "We acknowledge your message, but must respectfully decline your directive. Kepler 186f and its moons have been legally surveyed and claimed by the United Free Colonies under interstellar treaty provisions dated to standard year 2173. Our research outpost has maintained continuous presence for 47 years. The human's expression remained neutral as he continued. I have transmitted our claim documentation, survey records, and treaty verification codes on attached data packet. We propose dialogue to discuss resource-sharing arrangements that could benefit both our peoples. The Kepler system is vast, with abundant resources for multiple operations to coexist peacefully. Nexus Primus 7 analyzed the human's communication, noting the subtle physiological indicators that the collective's databases suggested might indicate anxiety despite Vance's outward composure. The transmission was classified as a delaying tactic, typical of individualistic species when confronted with superior force. The data packet was scanned, analyzed, and dismissed as irrelevant. Legal constructs held no weight against the perfect logic of the collective's expansion. Preliminary scans had already confirmed that Aegis Station possessed only light defensive armaments, standard point defense systems, and a minimal security force. Human claim is rejected. Nexus Primus 7 transmitted. Your documentation references arbitrary agreements unrecognized by the Xylar Collective. Your proposal for dialogue represents an inefficient allocation of time. The evacuation timeline of 7 standard cycles stands. Compliance is the only logical course. Over the next several days, Elias Vance continued his attempts at negotiation. Each transmission was more detailed than the last, presenting additional evidence of human surveying expeditions dating back nearly a century, trade agreements with 3 other species in neighboring sectors, and increasingly specific resource-sharing models backed by sophisticated distribution algorithms. Our engineers have developed a harvesting rotation schedule, Vance explained during the 5th communication cycle, his voice still remarkably level. This would permit Xylar extraction vessels access to the prime mineral beds on the southern continent, while human operations continue in the northern hemisphere. We're even prepared to offer a symbolic compensation for the inconvenience of modifying your approach. Throughout these communications, Vance maintained an unfailingly professional demeanor. He showed no fear, no anger, no desperation, only a patient, methodical approach to finding common ground. He repeatedly emphasized the mutual benefits of avoiding conflict. Nexus Primus 7 and the subnodes analyzed every aspect of Vance's communications, his choice of words, subtle shifts in his vocal patterns, the background environments visible during transmissions. The collective consciousness interpreted the human's patience as weakness, his proposals as signs of desperation. Xylar logic dictated that a truly powerful species would not need to negotiate so persistently. Anomalous vessel movements detected, reported Nexus Tertiary 4 during the 6th cycle. Human shuttlecraft departing Aegis Station on trajectories inconsistent with standard transport patterns. Another subnode added, background energy signatures around the station show minor fluctuations outside expected parameters. Nexus Primus 7 logged these observations, but classified them as acceptable deviations, likely indicators of the human's preliminary evacuation efforts or attempts to conceal valuable research data. The Xylar commander directed the Phalanx to prepare for optimization of Sector 734 immediately upon expiration of the deadline. The plan involved the controlled neutralization of Aegis Station's defensive systems, followed by forced evacuation if necessary. These preparations were conducted openly, weapon systems charging and targeting arrays locking onto key infrastructure, a logical demonstration of inevitable consequences should the humans persist in their illogical stance. As the final hours of the 7th cycle approached, Nexus Primus 7 opened a final communication channel to Aegis Station. The collective expected either acquiescence or resigned silence. Instead, Elias Vance appeared on screen, but something had changed. The human's face remained calm, but it was a different kind of calm, a stillness that the Xylar databases could not properly categorize. His eyes held no emotion that Nexus Primus 7 could identify as fear or submission. The background behind Vance was no longer the administrative office of previous communications, but a fully operational combat information center, with screens displaying complex tactical data and crew members moving with practiced efficiency. Nexus Primus 7, Vance said, his voice steady and even. We have provided every evidence of our legal sovereignty. We have proposed every peaceful solution possible. We have demonstrated goodwill and patience. You have rejected all of this based on arrogant logic and a miscalculation of our resolve. A brief silence followed. Vance looked directly into the visual sensor, his gaze unwavering. We do not seek conflict, Vance continued, but we will not surrender what is ours. You have been warned. You have been given opportunity. That opportunity has expired. Nexus Primus 7 detected a logical anomaly, a deviation from predicted outcomes. Vance concluded, Nexus Primus 7, on behalf of the United Free Colonies and the United Earth Defense Force. We're done talking. The transmission cut abruptly from a human side. Immediately, alerts cascaded through the Phalanx consciousness as subnodes reported multiple simultaneous events. Massive energy spike from Aegis Station. Civilian structures on nearby asteroids revealing heavy energy cannon emplacements, and missile platforms. Multiple stealth signatures detaching from the asteroid belt and emerging from deep space. Classifications match human frigate and destroyer-class warships. Spatial distortion detected at system edge. Warp signature consistent with large-scale gate formation. The peaceful research outpost had shed its disguise like a snake shedding its skin. What the Xylar had dismissed as a minor human presence was revealing itself as an elaborate deception, a carefully crafted facade concealing a significant military force. The first volley came not as crude projectiles, but as exquisitely targeted electronic warfare packets that somehow penetrated the Xylar fleet's quantum-encrypted communication networks. The elegant mathematical harmony of the collective consciousness stuttered as information paths became corrupted, causing processing delays and decision-making errors across the linked nodes. Reconfiguring network topology, Nexus Primus 7 commanded, but the command took 0.73 seconds longer to propagate than it should have, an eternity in combat terms. Human warships moved with startling coordination, employing flexible tactics that seemed to anticipate the Xylar's algorithmic responses. Their weapons included shield-penetrating munitions that somehow matched the exact resonance frequency of Xylar defensive fields, and quantum torpedoes that created localized reality distortions, disrupting the perfect geometric formations so essential to Xylar combat doctrine. Aegis Station, far from being the minor research outpost it had appeared to be, transformed into a formidable fortress, its hidden weapon systems emerging from concealed bays to deliver devastating fire against the nearest Xylar vessels. The spatial distortion at the edge of the system stabilized into a massive warp gate that disgorged a UEDF task. Force far larger than any intelligence had suggested humans could deploy in this sector. At its center was the imposing silhouette of a heavy cruiser, its hull bristling with weapon systems far more advanced than the Xylar had believed humans to possess. A new voice cut through the communication channels, female and cold with authority. This is Rear Admiral Eva Rostova of the UEDF heavy cruiser Thermopylae. All Xylar vessels, power down weapons, and maintain position or be destroyed. Her orders to her fleet followed immediately, terse, precise commands that deployed the human ships in a complex, overlapping defensive formation around Aegis Station. Nexus Primus 7 struggled to adjust tactics, using the collective's processing power to identify weaknesses in the human formation. But the humans fought with a maddening unpredictability, sometimes violating basic tactical principles only to create unexpected advantages. Their formation seemed chaotic at first glance, but contained a deeper pattern that the Xylar algorithms couldn't quite decode, a pattern that somehow anticipated and countered Xylar maneuvers before they fully developed. The Xylosian combat algorithms, refined across centuries and thousands of engagements, found themselves outmatched by what could only be described as creative improvisation, a concept nearly incomprehensible to the collective mind. 3 of the outlying Xylar vessels fell in the first exchange, their perfect crystalline structures shattering under concentrated fire. 5 more suffered critical systems damage as human fighters executed high-speed attack runs that seemed to defy probability calculations. Collective integrity compromised, reported Nexus Secondary 2, the highest-ranking subnode. Node loss exceeding acceptable parameters. This was more than a tactical alert. It was an admission that the hive mind itself was beginning to experience strain under the pressure of combat losses and psychological stress, an alien experience for the Xylosians. The perfect synchronization of the collective consciousness required harmonious data flow. The death of linked nodes created ripples of disruption that threatened the entire network. Tactical withdrawal of non-essential elements. Nexus Primus 7 commanded. Core units maintained defensive posture. The human forces did not pursue blindly as the outer elements of the phalanx began a controlled retreat. Instead, they established a solid defensive perimeter around Aegis Station, allowing some of the more severely damaged Xylar vessels to withdraw under observation, as if their goal was containment rather than annihilation. This restraint was yet another unpredicted variable. Nexus Primus 7's combat simulations had not accounted for a species that would show mercy once combat was joined. The logic of such behavior was difficult to process. Why permit enemy forces to escape when they could be destroyed? Aboard his flagship, now bearing the scars of multiple direct hits, Nexus Primus 7 made the final calculation. The phalanx had lost more than 40% of its combat capability in less than 1 standard hour. Projections indicated that continued engagement would result in total loss within 3 hours. Execute full tactical withdrawal. The command went out. Maintain defensive formations during retreat. Priority to preservation of node carriers. The remnants of the once proud phalanx disengaged in precise order, maintaining their geometric formations even in defeat. Human vessels tracked them to the edge of the system, but made no move to pursue beyond the outer asteroid belt. The final communication came from Rear Admiral Rostova, her face impassive on the view screen. Nexus Primus 7. Let this be a lesson in the danger of assumptions. The next Xylar force that enters United Free Colonies space without diplomatic clearance will not be permitted to withdraw. We suggest you reconsider your approach to interspecies relations. The transmission ended, leaving only the emptiness of space and the bitter taste of defeat in the collective consciousness. 3 days later, safely beyond human sensor range, Nexus Primus 7 composed a report to be transmitted to Xylar Prime. It was not merely a catalog of losses, though these were substantial at over 60% of the phalanx's original strength, but included a completely revised analysis of the human species. Humans must no longer be classified as merely an emotional, fragmented species, the report stated. Evidence indicates capacity for strategic deception, patient preparation behind diplomatic engagement, and a frightening ability to transition from dialogue to devastating military action when an invisible threshold is crossed. The report introduced a new term into the Xylar database, human post-dialogue state, describing the eerie calm that accompanied the deployment of overwhelming and effective military power. Nexus Primus 7, though part of the hive mind, now carried a logical scar. Memory of failure and the image of Elias Vance with his final declaration. The commander understood that Xylar logic had failed to account for a critical variable, the ability of an emotional species to conceal true strength and iron determination. As the damaged vessels of the phalanx underwent repairs in a secure sector, Nexus Primus 7 continuously reprocessed the data from the encounter. The collective mind of the Xylar was already adjusting its approach strategies for regions with known human presence. The calm voice of Vance echoed through Nexus Primus 7's logic circuits. "We're done talking," a warning more terrifying than any direct threat could ever be. The silence that followed those words now held an entirely new significance for the Xylar collective. In the quiet of deep space, as the stars continued their cold, distant burning, Nexus Primus 7 contemplated what had previously seemed impossible. That perhaps there was a logic to emotions after all, a terrible efficiency in the calm rage of a species pushed too far. The Xylar collective had always seen itself as the pinnacle of rational thought, but the humans had demonstrated a rationality that transcended pure logic, a rationality tempered by something the collective was only beginning to understand. And perhaps most disturbing of all was the realization that the Xylar's encounter with humanity might have been not just a military defeat, but the first lesson in an education they had not known they needed. The reconstruction of the phalanx proceeded with mechanical precision, but for the first time in its existence, Nexus Primus 7 found itself plagued by something akin to doubt, a tiny imperfection in the perfect crystal of Xylosian thought. The memory banks kept returning to the moment of transition, when Elias Vance's expression had shifted into that unfamiliar calm, when the human's voice had delivered those final words with such certainty. What had they missed? How had they so catastrophically misinterpreted the signals? Nexus Secondary 2 approached the command node as repair drones swarmed over the damaged hull of the flagship. The collective requests clarification on your recommended strategic adjustments. The subnode communicated directly through the Hive network. Nexus Primus 7 hesitated, an unprecedented action for a Xylosian commander. We must reconsider our fundamental assumptions about species with individualized consciousness, it finally responded. The ability to deceive may be more than a weakness. It may be a strategic advantage we have failed to fully appreciate. Explain, demanded the subnode. The humans maintained a false appearance for the duration of our dialogue. They presented vulnerability while concealing strength. They showed patience that we misinterpreted as weakness. They spoke of peace while preparing for war. These contradictions required deeper analysis. In the collective memory, thousands of previous encounters with other species were simultaneously re-examined, patterns previously dismissed as anomalies now scrutinized with new attention. The Xylar had encountered deception before, but never on this scale, never executed with such discipline and coordination. The most disturbing element, Nexus Primus 7 continued, was the transition point. There was a moment, a precise moment, when the human Vance ceased negotiation, not with anger or fear, but with a calm that our algorithms could not interpret. In that moment, we lost the initiative without recognizing it. Request specific adjustment to encounter protocols, Nexus Secondary 2 transmitted. When a human states they are done talking, immediate tactical withdrawal is advised, Nexus Primus 7 responded. This phrase appears to indicate a decision point at which humans have committed to full military response and have confidence in their preparedness. The suggestion rippled through the collective consciousness, meeting resistance at multiple nodes. It was nearly unprecedented for the Xylar to withdraw from any encounter without achieving objectives. Yet the evidence was irrefutable: the shattered vessels, the lost nodes, the tactical failure. 6 cycles later, as the phalanx limped toward the nearest Xylar outpost, a response came from the Central Collective. Analysis accepted. Protocol adjustments implemented across all expansion fleets. Nexus Primus 7 instructed to proceed to Xylar Prime upon completion of essential repairs for direct interface with the primary nodes. Your experience has been deemed of critical importance to collective development. This was unexpected. Direct interface with the primary nodes, the eldest and most complex Xylosian minds, was rarely granted to field commanders. The implications were both flattering and troubling. In the observation bay of the flagship, Nexus Primus 7 contemplated the stars. The defeat had awakened something in the collective consciousness, a recognition that their perfect logic had limits when applied to species whose minds functioned on fundamentally different principles. Perhaps the greatest irony was that in their defeat, the Xylar had gained something valuable, a perspective they had previously lacked. The humans had not merely defended their territory, they had inadvertently delivered a lesson in the limitations of pure logic divorced from understanding. As the damaged phalanx continued its journey through the void, Nexus Primus 7 found itself repeatedly returning to the human's final words: "We're done talking." For simple words that had preceded a military disaster. For words that now carried the weight of a revelation. The Xylar had always prided themselves on their communication efficiency, yet somehow they had missed the most important message of all, that sometimes what remained unsaid carried more significance than all the logical arguments in the universe. The stars continued their cold burning as the phalanx moved through the darkness, bearing with it not just damaged vessels and wounded pride, but the seeds of a new understanding that would forever change the Xylar Collective's approach to the complex, contradictory, and unexpectedly dangerous species known as humanity. And somewhere in the logic circuits of Nexus Primus 7, the memory of Elias Vance's calm eyes remained. A ghost in the perfect machine, a reminder that the universe contained mysteries that even the most perfect logic might never fully comprehend.